what happened is Kevin was spot on the mark in talking about what happens with the person, the agent that made a mistake in the count, and how was that bordering on intentional murder. And we said it actually isn't, uh, because and then there was this issue with Rava and Rav Shimi, where Rava said, look, at the end of the day, it's there's three judges. The one reads the scriptural selection, the second one is doing the counting, and the third one says to the agent, strike him. So why is the agent even responsible? Because he shouldn't only rely on the judge. And Gavin asked a great question. He said maybe he doesn't want to be disrespectful for the judge. But if he's going to end up going to the city of exile and lose the rest of his life with his family, he can say in a very respectful manner, Judge, I've written down at 12:05, it's the sixth lash, 12:07, it's the seventh lash, and my count doesn't add up to yours. How does yours add up? It could be my fault. But I would certainly bring it up because you don't want a death on your hands. So why is the judge not responsible? Well, we learned that in Shemaim, sure. But as far as earthly judgment is concerned, there's the law, Ein Shaliach Lidvar Aveira. The law does not recognize agency in the matter of transgression. What does this mean? It's a case of groma. Anything indirect that is responsible for any negative behavior, you cannot be prosecuted by the Beis Din on earth. Shemaim will hold you responsible, but not on earth. So therefore, it's not the judge's fault. And we end up saying that, listen, at the end of the day, Rava's suggestion that it's bordering on the intentional is not, and that's why, and even, why did Rava bring it up? Very simply, Rava said, listen, there are cases where it was negligence to such a gross degree, it was bordering on the intentional, and he uses this case of the agent of lashes. And basically, it's proved here that it wasn't bordering on intentional. It was negligent, but it was a bad counting. So that's what Rav Shimi says. Rava said, well, shouldn't he keep his own count? And that's why it's bordering on the intentional. It's not only up to the judge. So at the end of the day, this doesn't prove conclusively that if it's bordering on the intentional, that in that particular case, that it automatically is a exoneration to allow you to have exile. Does that make sense? So that's what Rava was trying to prove. It's not saying Rav is wrong. It's just not enough evidence to the fact that even if it's bordering on the intentional, that it allows you to have exile. So why did Rava bring this up? Rava brought this up very simply because he was saying he doesn't agree with Rav Yossi Bar Chanina, who said that, according to Rava's explanation of Rav Yossi Bar Chanina, is that exile he can't do exile because his sin is too great. That's how he was explaining Rav Yossi Bar Chanina, and that's the reason why he's not given exile when he gave him permission, and he's still carrying on with lethal equipment, which means he doesn't deserve divine kapora, according to his explanation of Rav Yossi Bar Chanina, nor does he deserve protection from the families lynching him and killing him. The Gemara doesn't explain Rav Yossi Bar Chanina like that. He's just saying that the prototypical case of the forest doesn't mimic this, because there you're dealing with issues of domain differences. It's not where they both can go. The one is a private domain where he's allowing access, and the others are is a public domain where they're both allowed access. Therefore, we're saying the cases are not homogeneous. Then it goes and says, well, maybe we can prove something else from another brisa. What's it saying? It's saying somebody's throwing a stone in the public domain. So, well, that's bordering on negligence, bordering on the intentional. What are you throwing stones and bricks at people for? They say, no, it's not bordering on the intentional. The guy is a bit of a lost cop, and he's actually doing something very negligent, but his focus is on dismantling his wall. The response to that is very simple. What was he doing it during the day where there are people saying, no, he built the wall at night? So they're saying, okay, but even at the night there could be some vagrants. You're undoing your wall at 2 a.m., maybe some drunk vagrants there. That's also not okay. And he's saying, hang on a second, he's doing it during the day, but he's actually throwing it in the trash. Then the Gemara brings up, says, okay, so if the trash is a normal trash, okay, nobody said it's fine. But often what would happen is people would use a metal can, like I'm talking about one of those big dustbins, to go in there privately and relieve themselves. It's not like today in South Africa where some special human being urinates against the wall after having 5 castle lagers. We're talking about there where people were a little bit modest and they'd walk into a, what you call it, a metal bin and relieve themselves with a little bit of modesty. So he's saying you can't just throw bricks in there, because if you kill a person, you're liable. You've got to make sure there's no bricks. So then the Gemara says, well, let's disband this issue of the wall altogether. Because if you're throwing something in the trash, you don't even need the excuse that your mind's on the wall. You're throwing it in the trash. And it's saying, listen, if it's frequented by nobody during the day, it's an unavoidable mishap. You're not going to go to the city of exile. You haven't done anything wrong. And if there are people that frequent it, you don't deserve exile, because exile is too good for you. You should have the family lynching you and not to have that kapara. So either way, it's either unintentional murder bordering on intentional, or it's an unavoidable mishap. How do you have a case? It's either one or the other. How do you have a case where it's both? And you must remember, Rav Papa brought this explanation. So Rav Papa gives a solution. Rav Papa's a genius. He said, in the Mishnah's ruling, it's applicable only in the case of a trash pile that is used by people to relieve themselves in at night, and it's not generally used by people to relieve themselves during the day. But there are occasionally some who happen by and sit there and use it even during the day. So he, the one who killed the passerby with the stone, is not a nearly intentional murderer, since in the final analysis, it's generally not used by people to relieve themselves during the day. But neither is the victim of an unavoidable mishap, since there are occasionally some who happen by and sit there during the day. So what that means in that particular case is that it might refer to the fact that he is liable for exile in that case. So that's why Rava was using it, or the Gemara was using it as an example of, hang on, if you're doing something unintentional, bordering on intentional, this is another example, not just of lashes, where you're actually entitled to exile. So these are cases Rava's using against Rav Yossi Bar Chanina, his understanding of Rav Yossi Bar Chanina. But again, Rav Papa said, listen, it's not bordering on the intentional, because it's hardly ever used during the day. But he's entitled to exile because he's not totally blameless as an unavoidable accident, because sometimes people do frequent it during the day. So that's why he's liable to exile. So it's not proving Rava's case at all. So anyway, they dropped Rava's case. I'm not saying Rava's wrong. Rava's a genius. I'm just saying these two don't conclusively prove the case. All right, what do you think of that summary, guys?
In my opinion, if there's a remote chance that somebody could be on that trash can, because in that trash, relieving himself or sitting there, even if it's only once or twice a month that somebody's there, there's still a chance, and you shouldn't be throwing anything over that wall. In my opinion, it's as bad as if there's a whole group there, because you've got a chance. If you've got a chance of killing somebody, you've got a chance of killing somebody. End of story.
So you are right, but I just need to make a definition clear for you. Okay. They are.
No, I realize that.
So I think you are right. I actually think you're onto something. You must be insane to risk people's lives like this. And that is exactly why you get exiled. Same in the forest. In the forest, you're doing something very dangerous, and it's a public area where other people could be. To be that negligent, you deserve to be exiled for the rest of your life. Here, you're that negligent that you deserve to be exiled for the rest of your life. However, it is not as bad as being definitely sure there's somebody there, definitely sure, and therefore that's unintentional murder bordering on intentional, because in the case of the carpenter, you have said to the person, come downstairs, and you're there with lethal equipment. That you don't even deserve exile for, because the family will kill you in vengeance. You don't deserve that protection, because that is bordering on murder. Furthermore, in Shemaim, you don't deserve that kapora, and therefore you're not going to pay for it in this lifetime and get off easy in the next. So you're completely correct, but let's just define the difference between degrees of wrong here. And the proof of it, which I think Evan is really on the mark, is the court would see two differences here. Say, for example, you have you've got a man and a woman, okay, and they have an affair. Now, what happens is the husband walks in, okay, and when the husband walks in, he kills that other man and he kills his wife. A lot of the court would be sympathetic because of the shock of seeing his wife with somebody else, and they might not be as heavy on the sentence. Let's tweak it a little bit, and let's say that the person that murdered the husband was the man she was having an affair with and wanted the married woman, which is not his, alone with her, and the $4 million she's going to inherit by knocking off the husband. Therefore, the court will be less merciful on that man than the husband, and therefore they both murder. But we can see circumstances dictate the level of mercy. I don't know if that helps you at all, Gav.
No, it does. So that's it's extenuating circumstances.
Yes, and
so with the first guy,
yes,
when he walks in, absolutely. I mean, that's, he's not thinking straight. He just wants to kill that guy because he's never seen this before. He's never seen his wife or something.
Correct. So what I'm saying is here there are different circumstances, and you are completely correct. What Gavin is saying is both are inexcusable, and he's right. But Shemaim would certainly, and the courts of earth, would certainly hold him much more liable in a case where he gave the person permission to come downstairs and he carried on with lethal equipment compared to perhaps there might be somebody else in the territory that might frequent it. But it's statistically unlikely. They're both two levels of culpability. They're both wrong. Gavin's completely correct. But the one is unforgivable and the other one is forgivable after a lifetime in the city of exile.
Because of it was unintentional. That's why they received refuge.
It might be unintentional, but as Gavin said, you really cost a life that you could have avoided.
It's still negligent. Absolutely. But it wasn't deliberate. But it was someone still lost their life.
So I think the whole point of Torah learning is to learn degrees and nuances and the definitions within hairbreadths. Because, you see, one of the biggest problems I have with Democrats and leftists, let's not talk about Democrats in the 80s that still had a brain. Let's talk about leftists now that call themselves Democrat, is that everything with them is emotions, okay? And the reason is you can't have a proper conversation because you're racist, you're sexist, you have stare rape.
You're a Nazi also, even if you're Jewish.
Any disagreement you have with them, you're a Nazi. And the very point of any sort of truth-seeking is that you can have, without emotion and intellectual discussion, to go on within a hair's breadth of the nuances of all the facts without judgment. And the problem is a leftist person would not have a common sense that Gavin has to say, okay, there's more to the story than meets the eye. There are layers upon layers of accountability. And they just say, oh no, how can you do this? This is not a soapbox. This is a case where we define facts. And that's exactly why America will self-destruct itself, because unless you can base it on principles and ethics God-given, there's going to be anarchy. So, Gavin, I appreciate the fact that even though sometimes you and I can disagree, we both dedicated to what is true, and we work through it. And sometimes I turn around and say, you know what, Gavin's got a point. I never thought about that. Or sometimes you look and think, maybe there's another way to look at it. But the point of it is, if you're looking for the truth, that in essence is what this Gemara learning is all about.
So,
and
Gavin,
the tough part of the Gemara, Kevin, this is so tough, is that it's counterintuitive. Because there's a part of us that turns around and says, oh, that's so unfair, or that's so harsh. I mean, how do you give lashes, and what sort of people beat other people? But if you pull aside that aspect and you have logic and saying, listen, there's certain people that don't have the courtesy to treat other people well. And then the occasional beating would stop somebody that's very aggressive and physically stronger than the weak person from taking advantage. So when you go through rational discourse, Kevin, and you're not a leftist, exactly as you once said to me, you're not going to say, oh, it's cruel to do this. Or you look at it with logic and you say, sometimes people only behave well. It's amazing how their clearing clears up when they've been beaten. Their ears suddenly almost clear up. It's like a medical phenomenon. So let's go on to what we're going to discuss today. Was there something?
So just before you discuss, you're saying, Gavin, what Evan said earlier a few minutes ago, sometimes you need to look at the extenuating circumstances.
Always.
Before reaching a judgment.
Always. You're absolutely correct. So let's hit this new part that Rav Papa is going to say. So we've got 20 minutes left. Another version, because there are 3 versions of this brisa. It's going to start to get tough. So, another version of Rav Yossi Bar Chanina's statement. Rav Papa, who's a genius, said in the name of Rava. Okay? Rava teaches Rav Yossi's statement as having been said in regard to the first case of the brisa as follows. The first part of the brisa stated, if one enters the shop of a carpenter without permission, no permission, and a chip of wood flies off and strikes him on the face and he dies, the carpenter is not liable. It was regarding this case of the brisa that Rav Yossi Bar Chanina said he would be liable for 4 things if the victim is merely injured, and the brisa means only that he's not liable to exile if the victim dies. I'm going to repeat this. So according to Rav Papa's explanation of Rava, there is a major difference here. In Rava's explanation, and not Rav Papa quoting Rava, Rava's explanation of Rav Yossi Bar Chanina is saying that, and the Gemara's version, let's just call it the Gemara's version of Rav Yossi Bar Chanina, is saying that you are not liable without permission for the 4 sort of compensatory amounts that you pay in terms of injuring a person. Without permission. You are liable if the person granted permission and you injure him, because if you've given permission as a carpenter to let your client come down, then you are aware. And since you are aware, that's gross negligence and you're entitled to pay for the 4 things. And as Gavin said yesterday, it's nezek shalom, actual damage. You have, Gavin, I re-listened to the shir, and you didn't mention medical expenses. You said actual damage for physical. It's a different distinction to medical. It's got its own amount. Are you with me? So medical is a separate definition. So medical, but I know you were thinking of medical. I heard your talk.
No, yeah.
I know.
No, I thought they were one and the same.
Definition was it's a nezek shalom is actual damage. You have you've got pain, you've got medical, and you've got convalescing. And Gavin explained it brilliantly yesterday with regards to the difference between an actual damage. You pay the difference of what he would have earned as an employee in his much higher capacity position compared to now, and the convalescing, which is the time off he needed to do his new position of work based on his current level of limitation. So Gavin explained it perfectly. Okay. Just hang on, it's about to join. Kebs, how's it?
Can you?
Good. Listen, I urge you after the shir, if you listen to the first 20 minutes that you missed, guys, was it worthwhile for a kibbutz to listen to the first 20 minutes? Yes or no? You can be honest.
Absolutely. No, I'm honest.
Yeah, absolutely. So will you listen to the first 20 minutes on the video? Is that okay with you, Kibs?
Yeah.
All right.
Sure.
So let me just fill you in on where we are so far. So Rav Papa now is quoting Rava. So this is a slightly different interpretation of the first case, because the Gemara said Rav Yossi Bar Chanina is saying that if you don't have permission to enter, you're not liable for the 4 things in terms of physical damage, which is nezek shalom, actual damages, tsar, pain, medical, refuah, and convalescing. Okay? As well as what you could earn in a previous capacity before you're injured compared to now, as well as the convalescing, the recuperation period of earning in your new limited position. So that's paid according to the Gemara's explanation of Rav Yossi Bar Chanina only when the carpenter gave permission for his client to come downstairs, because he was aware that he was there because he gave permission. And therefore only in that case does he pay for injury. But when there's no permission given, the Gemara explains it that there's no injury payment because it's an unavoidable accident. He didn't think the guy was there. Does that make sense? But Rav Papa and Rav is explaining it differently. He was saying, no, in the first case, when the carpenter did not give permission, no permission, and if this client goes downstairs and he gets injured by the carpenter now has to pay for the 4 things. So the question I want to ask you guys is why? Just think about it for a second.
Sorry, say it again, Damon.
Okay. It's obvious in a case where the carpenter gave permission that he said, come downstairs, or I'm waiting for you, whatever. He's aware of the client coming downstairs. And if he's continuing with dangerous equipment, of course he pays the 4 things for injuring, because A, man is always responsible for those 4 things, and B, it is absolute gross negligence. He never wanted to hurt him, so he doesn't pay for humiliation. It's not like a bar fight where he wanted to hurt him, but he was bordering on stupidly neglectful. So he does pay for the 4 other things. So that's a case where he gives permission, but the Gemara is fairly clear. And the Gemara says where he gives no permission, you don't have to pay that because he's not expecting the guy. So when the guy comes downstairs, the carpenter, it's an unavoidable accident. The guy shouldn't have come downstairs. He doesn't have permission. So you don't have to pay for injury in that case on those 4 things at all. Not at all.
Right, because he doesn't have permission.
But this version from Rav Papa in the name of Rava said if he comes downstairs without permission, he must pay for those 4 things. Why? Why do you think?
Because he...
I gave you a clue 3 days in a row, guys. So it's not coming out of a vacuum.
You didn't tell us to look out for clues.
No.
So
Of course. But you guys are...
No, it's a joke.
You're not
I'm
special.
trying to be a smart addict.
You guys are bright.
Can I try? Let's give it try those. I'll try a go. You want to try first?
Give it a shot.
My guess is basically that like he went over his boundaries. He didn't have permission, and like he went ahead. Somewhere along those lines.
But there's a problem with that because you proving the first case of the Gemara. If the client didn't have boundaries to go there, okay, and he went down, that client acted with stupidity and therefore is responsible for his own injury, which you support the first opinion of the Gemara, which is correct. I mean, what is the guy doing there?
Because he didn't have permission.
He didn't have permission. I'm asking something different. Rav Papa said in the name of Rava, in a case where the carpenter did not grant him permission, he didn't give permission, and the guy came downstairs, the client. Why does Rav Papa say in the name of Rava that he owes him for the 4 damages of injury?
Because he didn't have permission, he broke the rules.
No, you're not hearing. You're saying exactly the opposite with logic.
The opposite, yeah.
You're saying the opposite because...
I've got an idea, but Kevin was first.
Hang on, Kev, before you go there. What I'm saying is that, Kev, your logic is sound, but your logic is sound according to the Gemara's explanation that the carpenter is not liable because the client overstepped his boundaries and he came down where he had no permission to be, and therefore it's his own fault he got injured and it's not for the carpenter to pay. You're correct.
Okay. Yeah.
What I'm saying is where he did not have permission, why would the carpenter then have to pay, according to Rav Papa? In the name of
Kevin first, otherwise I'll give it a try.
Okay, you guys go ahead.
Go.
Okay, I may not be right. Gavin may be right, but I'm going to give it a bash.
Go.
No, I'm not sure either. I've got an idea.
Go, Kevin, go.
The guy still got, even though he didn't have permission, he still got killed. And the carpenter...
We're talking death here. We're talking...
The damage... He's still the injuries. He still injured him, and it was from his equipment that injured the guy. He still has to be careful, even though they didn't give him permission. You still have to be cautious, even though the guy didn't have a right to be there. It's possible that people can come in without permission, and they should still be aware of this.
So I want to ask you something. You break into my house without permission. You're not going to rob me, and I've got 2 Rottweilers, and they tear you to pieces.
Oh, that's self-defense. That's different.
No, it's not self-defense. You're not attacking. I'm watching a mini-series at home. I'm relaxing in my Rottweiler, and they don't feel like supper, and I can't understand why they're not hungry. They've eaten. Do you understand the question? So,
Yeah,
Gavin,
but it doesn't make whether they had permission or not. The guy broke in, and now he's liable for the damages.
no, he's not. He's not. Akiva, we've learned all the way along front that if somebody comes into your property without permission and you don't pay the kofir payment, it's actually in the latter part of this Gemara, and they get killed by your dog and they don't have permission to be in your place, you're not liable for the kofir payment because they broke into your property. When you don't give somebody permission to come into your domain and they get injured or they get killed, even if they're not robbing you, they don't have permission. So you're not liable for that.
Right.
No, but you're proving my case. You're not giving logic to the contrary. The question is, Rav Papa is saying in the name of Rava that the carpenter is liable. And Kevin said he's liable because it's still his equipment that damaged the other person. And we've learned in many Gemaras up until now that if you trespass without permission, okay, in that particular case, you're not liable if the other person gets hurt. And the classic case that we learned last time was a bore. You've got a swimming pool or a fence, and somebody comes in and they get injured or they drown or they fall into something on your property. You're not liable because they're in your domain. So
I suppose because you haven't really.
You haven't allowed. You haven't given
it's
permission.
not possibility to protect them. You didn't really invite them in.
Correct.
They just happened to jump over your wall, and they were negligent. They hurt themselves.
Correct. You don't have permission necessarily to, and in fact, we learned in Sanhedrin, and you were there. If a thief comes in and you don't know if he's stealing, because your adrenaline is rushing, he's known as Kim Lebedi Rabamine. He's basically dead man walking, because the assumption is, how do we know he's dead man walking? Because if he breaks your barrel, he's not liable for payment, because at that point, he's almost like a dead man, where if he gets shot, you're not liable as the homeowner because he's trespassed, and that's why he's not responsible for breaking your barrel.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, has anybody else got a clue? I've been giving you the clue for 3 days, and you're not special needs.
So let me try.
Yeah?
Gavin will probably get it.
No, I don't know. I've just got something that's a bit way out, but I think it might be the right thing. The only way I can see around this, in order for this to work, is that guy couldn't have broken in. This is my opinion. He couldn't have broken in. He had to have wandered in. So there was no gates, there was no doors, there was nothing preventing the guy from getting in. So the guy's just wandering around the shop and he lands up in the workshop by mistake. So there's no signs, there's no barrier, there's nothing, there's no division between one and the other section. So the guy knows not to go there. He didn't realize where he was going. So he landed up in that. That would be the only way around it, whereby the owner of the factory would be liable because he hasn't been responsible in demarcating and fencing off. And see, that's a lot of this is current stuff, so I'm not quite sure how it's applicable to them. But I would have said that as well. It should have been demarcated, separated, so the guy would know not to go in without permission.
Firstly, I think, even though it's not the answer, I think it's a brilliant answer. And the reason being is, we deal with companies like Sheck Safety, where they do safety regulations for the mines and factories, etc. And these are exactly the issues where that we deal with human resource departments all the time. And I can tell you, Gavin is dead accurate, that the law today, I'm coming to you now, Gavin, can see your hand up. The law today is exactly that Gavin says, is that there's been enough tragedies, deaths, and injuries that you've got what you call access control, biometric access control, that if somebody can't just wander into a factory, the indemnity signs, there's safety allowances that you can't just gain access to dangerous parts. And I think Gavin's law is completely concurrent with modern law, and it makes absolute sense. The only problem is that you do have signs saying non-liability. So even today, they're trying to say that you have no permission to be there, therefore we don't owe for injury, etc. Whether or not that would hold up in court, I don't know. But even today, that's why they have those signs up of non-responsibility. But before we get to Kevin, okay, let's get to Kevin quickly. We've got 6 minutes. What were you going to say?
Yeah, no, I think I sort of touched on that. I was just giving another alternative.
Yeah.
But I believe what Gavin said makes a lot of sense. But
Gavin,
remember, I said the other day, maybe if the guy should maybe lock the door shouldn't be open for someone to wander in.
I agree with you completely. But now that it's happened, fortunately, even people have these non-liability signs, Gavin, so that they say we're not responsible. And I don't think it's good enough in certain court cases to just say we told you we're not responsible if they were negligent. I completely agree with you, and Kevin agrees with you because
people also take their insurance policy in case an employer or a
indemnity,
indemnity and public liability.
Okay, so listen, I'll tell you what the Gemara's answer is, but it doesn't negate Gavin in any way. It says the first version does not rule that the carpenter is liable for 4 things. In other words, entry without permission. And the second version considers him grossly negligent, even in this case, since he was aware that the person had entered and he should have been more careful when chopping the wood. So Rashi is saying that this case, even in the first case, Rashi's explanation was very clear, is he never acknowledged permission, but he was aware that the person was there. How do we know this? Is if I'm working on machinery downstairs and the guy says, can I come down? I've got an order for you. Then the default position, according to Rashi, is that you are aware that somebody is there, even if you haven't acknowledged permission verbally. And therefore, that makes you grossly negligent. So that's why he's liable for the 4 things.
That's very clever. But now, just what happens if they don't hear each other? Because this guy's working on machinery. The guy says, can I come down? He thinks he hears the guy saying, yes, you can come down. Then so he goes down thinking he's got permission, but he hasn't in fact got permission. That's a bit of a balagan, if you ask me.
Okay, I think that is a good point. Is that so therefore there is another opinion that does say, like Gavin, what happens if it's not completely clear? And the reality is, it says man is always liable for injuring somebody else when there's any degree of negligence whatsoever. In other words, I suppose that means if they're not barrier control measures or lockable gates or some sort of buzzing in facility, even in those days where you could hear a gate unlock towards the downside thing, that you would be liable for those sort of things. But Rashi is just making 2 cases clear. Even if there's no permission, and he said when there's no permission that you're not liable for injury, he said that case is too obvious. We don't need to be told the super obvious. So therefore it can't be that obvious, the case in the Gemara. It's got to be a little bit more subtle than that. And what's the subtlety? You haven't acknowledged permission, but you're aware of his presence. Because if you weren't even aware of his presence, there's nothing to talk about. You don't need to be told the obvious. Do you see where Rashi is coming from? It's obvious.
So that's the part. That's the clue. That was the clue you were giving us, and we didn't get it.
No, listen, we've got 3 minutes left. I don't want to go on to the next part. Next time we're talking about what happens with Rav Papa's case in terms of exile. What's the story? But guys, I've been enjoying this feedback from you instead of just me teaching it over straightforwardly. I hope it's been helpful. It's been lovely to see Akiva's face too. Arthur, I've missed him, but I can understand. I hope he's still hearing. Can you acknowledge, Arthur, you've been listening at least?
Arthur, just take yourself off mute for 1 second and put it back on mute.
Arthur, have you been?
Arthur?
Yes, I've been listening.
Oh,
fantastic.
Can we see your lovely face? Right. Yay. Okay. All right, excellent, guys. I wish you a wonderful Shabbos. I personally am happy we're not, that tomorrow is a break for us, even though I love learning Torah and teaching Torah on Shabbos. you've got parshas to do and you've got things to do. And guys, I wish you a wonderful Shabbos. Arthur, it's lovely to see you. Akiva, I'm so pleased we had the delay so you could join us.
Great, thank you.
All right, listen,
So Akiva, you must say thank you. Say thank you to Eskom.
Yeah.
I won't exactly go as far as thanking Eskom.
Guys,
See, Eskom does do some good things. You don't realize it.
So listen, guys, just have a wonderful Shabbos. Akiva, listen, I hope you understood where I was coming from. It wasn't being personally critical. It's just exploring ideas and issues.
No, that's fine. I don't know really what you're referring to, but
no. I'm referring to the case where you are bright. So I was pushing you in terms of showing you that you had an excellent reasoning, but it supported the Gemara, not Rav Papa's explanation of Rava. So your reasoning was excellent.
Right. Thank you. I appreciate that.
It supported the Gemara, not Rav Papa.
Right. No, I appreciate that. But I was just trying to think aloud. Yeah.
But you know what? Thinking aloud is good because we actually, with all of you, we've actually dealt with like much more deep issues here than just the obvious. Obviously, if a guy doesn't know his end and somebody gets injured, it's obvious you don't pay. So we're dealing with much more subtle issues. Guys, have a wonderful Shabbos, and thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Damon. Okay, let me start again. Should I start again?
Yes, please.
Okay, so this year, Pesach starts on Motzei Shabbos.
Okay.
So we have to, as we know, everything has to be cleaned, and the bedika will be on Thursday night, even though you do the bitul on Shabbos morning. But everything has to be kosher Pesach, including the area where you normally eat, must be free of chametz. But the challenge on Friday night is it's still Shabbos, so we have to say amotzi, and we usually have challah. So the thing is, in order not to mess things up, you should rather take your bread outside, eat on the balcony, then dispose of it when you're finished, and then come back inside. Otherwise, you can drop crumbs in the area. And it's a major mission and a major hassle. So a few years ago, I heard, I don't know if it was a Sunny Road or Rov told me, you can have egg matzah. Now, egg matzah is kosher Pesach, as you'll see by the screen over here, the picture here. Can you see it there?
Yes.
And you see it says kosher Pesach there.
Yes.
So egg matzah cannot be used for the Seder. But you can vas on it, and I've got sources down below to confirm that. I'm going to be doing this because it's a major mission. I don't have a balcony. I don't have an outside section. I'm not prepared to go to a park and have a fine plan. And yeah, exactly. It makes a lot of sense. And you can say amotzi with it. Then after you finish, you put it away. It's not chametz. It's kosher Pesach, as you saw, but you don't fulfill your mitzvah of matzah because this is actually called mitzvah. Matzah Ashira, let's just go down and show you guys again. Can you see Ashira there, the word Ashira, which means rich man's bread, because it's made with fruit juice or wine.
So that's why it's not used on the Seder, because we have lechem oni for
lechem ani, which means poor man's bread, just flour and water.
Okay, so
but it's not chametz.
Not chametz, so it fulfills the criteria, but it reserves the specialness of proper matzah for the Chag. Very clever.
As you see there, and I'll highlight it. There we go.
Okay.
And so you can't use it for your Seder. You won't fulfill the mitzvah of matzah, the Seder, the breads, and for the afikomen, and for the sandwich, you have to have shmura matzah. And and it can only be used, it's basically for people who can't digest matzah, like sick people or kids, but it's not chametz. And so that's what I'm going to do. It's going to save so much hassle. I just thought of it now for you, for all of us.
Okay.
So there's the picture again. It says Ashira, which is...
Why is egg matzah easier to digest?
Because it's made with egg and with the fruit juice. That's why. The texture is fantastic. It's very nice, actually.
Is there no wheat inside there?
No, it is wheat. There's wheat inside. I'm going to show you something now. Of course, it is wheat. I'm going to show you. The sources here. So basically,
I don't
Gavin, hold on one sec. So you see, and the sources are, and this is from the OU website, by the way. I didn't get it from the Reform Transgender, sorry, I shouldn't say that website. Damon, will you cut that out?
I love it in.
There you see kosher.com, and it's I just copied it and put it on a Word document. May I use egg matzah on Shabbos for Lechem Mishnah, which is 2 breads, and that's from OU, which is the Orthodox Union. As you see, Gavin, I'm sure you've seen the OU symbol, which is like, it's American. There we go. They see the O, the U and the O there, Gavin? This is an OU product, but this is an OU product, and this is an OU article. So basically, what it's saying is, according to Rav Belsky, who was one of the famous poskim who passed away a few years back, if one eats 2 egg matzahs together with other foods, is fiat. Okay, so let's just go. I don't want to take too much time here. Okay, here we go. Any time one sits down for the intention to eat a Shabbos meal, the suda is automatically considered important.
Hang on, that's very interesting. Rav Moshe Feinstein, read that.
Moshe Belsky. No, but I'm coming to another one after that. Rav Moshe Feinstein is underlined under this. If Rav Moshe Feinstein writes Igrot Moshe, one who eats the egg matzah for Shabbos meal is required to wash and veg, even if the entire meal consists only of 2 matzahs, the cells of kibetza, which is an egg, which is a minimum shir or size for a Shabbos meal. So basically, I think that's it here. So I'm sure you go back to Rav Belsky. Eats 2 slices of bread at a normal meal. Therefore, if one eats 2 egg matzahs with other foods, it's the same thing basically. So you have to vas, and you can use it, and instead of bread, and you won't make any. And even if you small crumbs and you don't clean them up, let's say, it's not chametz. So people, like, sometimes I'm a bit paranoid, and people take this cleaning to the nth degree. It's just it saves a lot of hassle and aggravation. So it's basically, Gavin, so it's made with flour. Let's just see. You see, it says only for, you see what it's, I don't know if you can read it. I took the picture like half an hour ago. Only for people using to eat egg matzah, blessing is mazon, not usually, but this cannot be used for matzot on the Seder night. But it's basically, it's made with flour, either flour or either fruit juice and wine or grape juice. That's it. And egg. That's what it says. But it's got soft texture, so you can use it as a bread. And that's it, basically. I just wanted to bring that to you guys' attention.
Thank you. That's very practical.
Thanks.
Practical.